So what we have here is a relatively simple one. It's wanting us to find the difference between the mean and the median. The median is going to be the center data value when all of your data points are in order from least to greatest. They were kind enough to put our data points in order from least to greatest for us. Since we only have 4 values here, the middle is actually going to be somewhere between 8 and 10. Now, we're not allowed to use 8 or 10 as our middle there because it's actually between those. The way we do that is we're going to actually find the average of those two. So 8 plus 10 divided by 2 is going to give us 9. So our median is going to be 9. Now it wants us to find the mean. The way we find the mean is that we add up all of our data points and then divide by the number of data points we have. So it's going to be 3 plus 8 plus 10 plus 15, all divided by 4 because that's the number of data points we have. We go to solve that and we get that our mean is 9. Now our temptation is going to be you want to select option D over here, but that's not the correct answer because it wants to know the difference between those two. So you actually see how far apart they are. Since they're the same number, they're 0 apart, and the correct answer is 0 here. The only tricky part of that one is making sure that you read carefully and seeing that they're looking for the difference between the two. Which of the following describes a true relationship between those two functions? They've given us a graph here. We're going to take these one at a time to see if we can determine what's true and what's not. So f of x equals g of x for exactly 2 values of x. So it says that those 2 points, or those 2 functions, the 2 lines that are graphed, only touch at 2 points. If we look, that's true here and here. So I'm going to go ahead and circle that one because that's definitely true, but I'm going to double check our other ones just to make sure. F of x equals g of x for exactly 1 value. So again, that would mean those lines only cross once. That's definitely not the one we need. F of x is less than g of x for all x's. So that means at no point in time does f of x, which is our parabola here, get higher than g of x, which is our linear function. And that's just not true. Most of f of x is higher than g of x, so that's not it. F of x is greater than g of x for all values. Well, that would be true except for this little spot that drops below it right here. And since it says for all, that doesn't work. F of x is the inverse of g of x. That's not true at all, as the graphs would look very similar, but obviously different as their inverses there. So I mean, these are definitely not inverses of each other. So the only one that's definitely true is that it crosses at exactly 2 points. Trapezoid ABCD is graphed in the standard XY coordinate plane below. It wants to know what's the slope of CD. So this whole instruction you've got up here is essentially useless because we're not doing anything with a trapezoid. We're finding the slope of CD. And that's just another example of how they give you extra information that you don't need, and you just need to read carefully when you're solving these. So, slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So we're going to take our values for C and D. So we're going to have 9, 4, and 12, 1. So our y values are going to be 4 and 1. So 4 minus 1. And we've got to go in the same order here because you notice 2 comes first, then 1, 2, and then 1. So we started with the 4. So for our x values, we're going to start with the 9. We're going to do 9 minus 12. We subtract those, and we get 3 on top, and we get negative 3 on the bottom. Now, don't be tricked into selecting negative 3 there because that you see it on there and your brain wants to jump to that. Go ahead and take that extra step and simplify that and make that negative 1 for your answer. So on this one, same setup again. When ABCD is reflected over the y-axis to A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, what are the coordinates of D prime? So reflecting over the y-axis, your rule is going to be xy becomes negative xy. All you're going to do is change the sign of your x value. So if it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it becomes positive. So we're going to look at the values of D, it's 12,1. So our pre-image is 12,1. And our image, after we apply our rule, is going to be negative 12,1, which is F. On this one, if you remember the rule, it's going to be fairly straightforward. The tricky part will be making sure you pay attention to where your negatives are and don't select the wrong one on there. If you don't remember your rule, sketching a graph on each side would be an easy enough thing to do. Being able to count over to the y-axis, in this case we're going to be counting over to 12, and know that we're going to be going 12 on the other side. So it's going to be negative 12, 1 over here. That's how that works.